Hey everybody, and welcome to Bits of Board. We're talking board games, miniatures, cards and dice. My name's Michael, and yes, now it's time to actually play Deep Madness. Now I haven't played this for the camera yet. I'm about to go out there, take this camera, take it out there, and we're going to play through this, well, maybe not the full thing. We're going to get a feel for it and see what this game is kind of all about, and then we're going to check out what I like about it, what I might not like about it, all that sort of stuff. So let's get in and see what this game is all about. All right, guys and gals, let's start off by completely dispelling the idea that this game wasn't going to take up too much table space. This is the prologue, or the first mission in the game. There's not really a prologue mission. This thing is hard as balls no matter what. So this is the first thing that you're going to play. Setting up the game, we have a map, we've got a tracker over here, we've got tokens galore, we've got character sheets down the left here. We'll come to that in just a sec. We've got decks of cards, 1, 2, 3 decks of big cards. We've got 1, 2, 3 little decks of cards there, and there are plenty more hanging around. So, coming into this game, the things you want to know: where is this adventure taking place? What am I fighting, and just who the hell am I? Let's answer all these questions right now. Now, typically a game of Deep Madness will take place on a map such as this. It's made up of a number of map tiles. Their normal side, these are the yellowish rooms that you've got going on, and their devoured side, they are the red rooms that you see floating around, and these represent the rooms that have been turned by the horrors that lurk beneath the ocean here. Now, devoured rooms, they're not like a normal room for obvious reasons, but it's not just the name that sets them apart. Devoured rooms come with one, well, generally 2 or more tokens. The first token is a spawn token. Now, this is an indicator of where monsters will be spawning if they spawn in the room. The other tokens floating around are actually the opposite side of the devoured marker here. And each of those provides generally a negative effect. I'm pretty sure they're all negative to any characters while they are situated in that space. Some, like this one and this one here, they will lower an attribute of the characters. In this case, it's their escape. Here and here, we have tokens that will reduce their sanity, making them expend sanity. What's on the other side of this one here? So this one, if a survivor is in this space at the end of the turn, they would gain 1 madness. Now, thematically, this is cool because the rooms are changing and morphing depending on how dangerous the areas are, I guess. But also it helps ensure that no 2 games are ever going to be played exactly the same, making players think strategically when they choose to move their investigators through. Other than that, though, the map is quite simple. Characters can move between tiles if the doorways are matching, here and here matching, and spaces in areas are generally cut off by a white line. You can see this one over here in the distance, but we've also got things like this little yellow line here that indicate a hatch, and players can actually interact with these hatches throughout the game. Now, other tokens you might see around are these blue bad boys here, and they indicate that the room is actually flooded. We are in the Kadath deep sea mining facility here, and flooding is kinda inevitable. Flooding is super important because basically it's going to kick characters' butts. These guys are almost as scary as the monsters that may inhabit the halls. We're going to see just what they do shortly, but for the moment, that is the tour of this particular game board. Over here we have our horrors and our monsters. Now, in any normal game, you're going to be drawing 6 monsters that you're going to be fighting throughout the encounter. In this case, we've picked up the Husk, the Blind, the Hysteria, Delirium, Ravenous, and the Twisted. And I've got all their models out because there is actually a model limit in this game. Now, in the base game, there are 2 other horrors that could make an appearance, and also a good handful of epic monsters for the epic monster variant. Now, each horror, each monster has their own special traits, and the way they work is it's basically spelled out on the card. So you really don't have to go to the rulebook for monster stuff, which is pretty dang cool. Let's take the Blind for an example here. You can see every round he's going to move attempt to attack and do his special ability. And if there are any additional rules that aren't just basic monster rules, they're going to be displayed in that bottom part of the card there. Very nice. There's no rolling for monster damage. They're just going to do however many damage over here. And their own life points are indicated over here, as well as any armor points they may have. Now, for every monster, we're going to be placing an investigator card above it, because the way that turn order works in this game is an investigator will get an action, a monster will get an action. An investigator will get their actions, the monster will get their actions. So it's going to be a bit of a zigzag. Now, this begs the question, what happens if you don't want to play with 6 investigators? And I would say straight up that 6 is probably the best way to do it, but they do allow for you to drop down as low as 4 investigators. For every investigator that you're not going to be playing with, you remove one of their character cards and place a blank card in. That means, well, there are still going to be 6 monsters or 6 types of monsters on the board, but the investigators aren't going to be able to do as much each round. That would seem very unbalanced, and it is actually. So the game provides a nice way to keep balance in check, I would say. They give you a handful of extra action tokens. Now we're going to start spilling into what investigators and stuff do here. Basically, every investigator will get 3 actions per round. Every time they move, they do an action. Every time they fight, they do an action. And with 3 actions, well, going from 6 to 4 players, you are losing 6 actions per round. So with these extra activation tokens, you kind of shuffle them up. We've got 3 1s, 2 0s, 2 2s, and you deal one of these out to every player. Now this means it's going to be a little bit randomized. Sometimes you'll only get 1. Most times you'll only get 1 extra activation, but sometimes you'll get 2. Other times you will get none. So you got to be on your toes a little bit, and you can't always rely on them. Makes things pretty interesting, but I'll tell you what, I almost prefer the 6-player style exclusively. But we'll talk more about that a little later. Now, last but not least, we have our characters. And for every character we have a miniature, and we have one of these oxygen dials. Now, oxygen dials, they go hand in hand with those flooded spaces and also tie in with a lot of the story elements in this game. The only things you really need to note straight up is you have your health value in the top left of the card, your sanity value underneath that, you have your escape value printed in the very bottom left of the card, and then we have any character-specific abilities spelled out on the card there, as well as any starting equipment that they may gain. Now we'll touch on all of this stuff as we move through the game. Now just before, I alluded to the fact that investigators have 3 actions to perform every round. And they can choose pretty much any combination of the following: moving, attacking, searching. Actually, you can only search once. You can trade your equipment, you can rest, you can lock, unlock or reset hatches, or you can do any actions that might be explained on your item cards. For Randy over here, she starts with the flashlight, which gains her a bonus to her escape. Jared over here, he gains the pistol, which allows him to attack and gives him a little bit better accuracy if he's attacking monsters that are in the same space as he. Now, for ranged weapons, down the bottom here, we've basically got all the information on dice we need to roll. Here we have our range, how many spaces we can shoot. Here we have how many dice we're going to be rolling. Here is our target to hit. So if we roll 2 dice, we need 4s or more to hit on each of those dice. And for every hit that we make, we are going to be doing 1 damage. Melee weapons have everything else except for the range. So you're just going to be restricted to dice, to hit, and damage. Now that's probably all you need to know moving into the next part of the video, but I do want to touch on the Devoured Track, which you can see sneaking around up the top here. Let's just move it out and have a bit of a look at what this thing is all about. Now the Devoured Track, this is essentially a round tracker for the game. This is essentially your time limit. No, you're not going to be able to wander the caverns of the deep sea mining facility forever. You have some pretty strict time pressures going on. Every round, we're going to move this sucker down a notch, and if we ever hit that last notch down in the bottom here, we lose the game. So things, yeah, time is pretty tight. Now we've got a few different markers here, as you can see. Every time we hit one of these red spaces here, we devour one of the rooms on the board. Now I'll show you what that is very shortly, don't worry about that. And these other ones here, we have a blue marker, a dark blue marker, and a purpley marker over here. For every one of those we hit, well, an event happens. What event happens? Well, that's going to be explained in every scenario. Deep Madness is a story-driven, scenario-driven game where the end of every chapter leads perfectly into the next. Or so I've seen so far. Alright, so with that said, that's everything we need to know. Let's see how this game plays, shall we? Alright, so I've got our 4 starting investigators floating around in their start space. Stuff it. I'm going to put their coloured bases on. They'll look much better on camera, but it doesn't quite fit. You'll see why in a sec. Yeah, so they cartoon things up a little bit and detract from the seriousness of this game, but you know what? It'll make it easier for us to figure out who is who. Although, we don't really have any pairing colours on any of our character sheets, so it's just, we could use some tokens, I guess. Anyway, I digress. Let's begin the game round. Now, every time we play a round, we do a certain number of things in a certain way, and all these things are explained or at least listed on these player aid cards that we have here, as well as on the other side of this one, we have all of the devoured effects. Now, right now, all of our survivors are hanging out in a devoured room that has a spawn location. They start there. Now this thing means nothing to us, it's just going to spawn evil monsters as we play through. Now the first thing we do is we jet into the Devour Phase, which is where we move our Devoured Tracker down 1 notch on the board. You want to see that in action? I'll bet. Here we go. Alright, now what this means is we have to devour a room, so we're going to do that, and then we are going to spawn a number of monsters equal to the number above the marker, and that is going to be 3, so let's go ahead and do that. Now when we devour a room, we head over to the room deck. We have 2 room looking decks here. One is the devoured cards. These are the rooms that are already devoured, and you can also tell they're in red. And then we have another deck over here that looks a little like that. And what we do is we take one of those cards, we look at it, and then we devour this room. So number 22, prepare to be flipped. Here we go. In the middle of the map, what we're going to do is we'll take those drowned tokens off there. We'll flip it over and make sure we've got our door alignments still the same. Move everything back down, and then we'll chuck those drowning markers back down. Flooded markers back down. Next, we have to allocate a spawn point. If monsters spawn, where do they spawn from? I would like to put them as far away as possible, so we'll pop this marker over here. Sorry, I bumped you there. But then we're also going to place a random negative effect marker, and this one is going to go right here, and I believe that will cause damage to any survivors who end their turn there. Brutal. Now with that out of the way, we begin spawning monsters, and we come to our 3rd miniature deck, this guy right here. We have to draw 3 of these suckers, and we're going to be spawning monsters. Alright, so the easiest way is going to have to be like this, guys. I'm going to draw our first monster to spawn, and it's going to be a Delirium. We're going to spawn 1 Delirium in room 22, the room that just got devoured. I grab one of those minis and chuck it in the room with the spawn token in it. Next we come back down here and we chuck this room here that just got enemies in it on the bottom of the deck. Next we spawn an additional Delirium for that second one over there in room 15, which has already been devoured. Basically, we're going to run through and do that 3 times. So next we have the blind, and they are going starting in room number 1. And another in room number 2. Our third monster to spawn is going to be the Husk. One of these in room 20 and another in room number 8. All right, guys and gals, are you breathing heavy yet? Because check that out. Look at that board. We already have monsters floating around everywhere, and we have a Husk in our very starting room. Oh my goodness. So that is both the Devour phase and the Spawn phase. We move into the activation phase, and we're going to take that activation marker, this one here, and we're going to move it through all of the monsters and all the characters in that zigzag motion that we saw earlier today. Now, our very first activation would go with the Husk, but the Husk comes with a partner card, this one here, the Mind Eater. Basically, the Husk can spawn these little creepy Mind Eater guys, these guys are right here. He can spawn them on the board, and they're going to be the first thing to activate every round. Unfortunately for them, none of them are on the board, so we're going to move straight into our first player activation, which is nobody. So we move into the Husk's activation, and bam, we are going to get attacked straight away. Let's head over and see what's going on. Our first Husk is situated up in room 8 here. We're going to go by the card here. He's going to move, and then he's going to attack. Well, he's going to move to the closest investigator that he can find his way to. The only place he can go is one room closer, so we're just going to do that. He's then going to attempt to attack. We don't have any attack special rules to read out, so we forget about that. And then we do his special. Spawn one Mind Eater in this Husk's space. So I'm going to take one of these little Mind Eater dudes, pop it in his space just like that. More monsters on the board. Next up, well, we have a little something else to resolve. This symbol here, this little one down here, means if the monster is in a devoured room, we have to resolve the bracketed text, and in this case, activate the Mind Eater once immediately. Let's check out this Mind Eater card. He's going to move twice and try to attack. So we're going to move him 1, 2 spaces closer to the investigators. There he is, wading his way through the drowned room. And then, we activate our other Husk. That's right, he's with us! Ah! Okay, firstly, he's going to move towards the closest investigators. Guess what, guys and gals? He's in the room, so he's going to attack. Now, he's going to straight up do just 1 point of damage to anyone. We get to decide who. And I'm thinking Jared is going to be the way to go. Where is he? He has the pistol. Uh-oh. No. He's this guy here. All right, Jared in the pink there. Now, good news for us, we can actually take a saving roll here. I'm going to take 2 of our beautiful custom dice here, and we're going to roll them. For every 5 or 6 that we roll here, we get to reduce the damage received by 1. Beautiful. We actually pull a 6 here, which means no damage for us. Now, Jared's not one to take this lying down. You already saw that he starts with the pistol, but he's also got a couple of other abilities. He has controlled bursts and suppressing fire. You may exhaust 1 sanity to attack a monster with a gun immediately after it has attacked you. Alternatively, we can exhaust 2 sanity to attack it before it attacks us. Well, I don't want to spend too much sanity, but I will happily take 1 sanity token to attack him after. His other ability there, Controlled Bursts, will allow him to roll 1 additional dice when rolling with a gun. That means he's going to be rolling 3 dice, usually hitting on 4s. Because of the gun's special ability, it goes to a 3+, 3 dice, 3+, a thank you. So just 1 hit there. Now, while this isn't enough to quite take down a Husk, he has 4 health, it's enough to at least wound him a little bit. Now we can go ahead and expend sanity to re-roll any dice we would like. Look, Jared's got a sanity limit of 4, so we may as well take just 1 more of those, and we'll re-roll one of his misses. There we go. 2 hits on the Husk there, a solid start. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our miniature here with this beautiful black base on it, and we're going to insert a 2 wound marker. Would you look at that? Ah, it fell off. There we go, that's never falling off. Anyway, we've done our little attack back there. Now the Husk will continue his activation. hitting his special and spawning one of those little mind-eater critter dudes who is going to get an activation immediately because it's spawned in a spawned room, so he is going to have a shot. May as well take on Jared as well. As usual, we get to roll 2 dice for our save here. Beautiful. We get the 6, which is enough to cause a success, reducing this sucker's damage from 1 to 0. And with that, guys, we are finished with the Husks activation. 1 monster. We move into the first survivor who will take an action today, and that is Randy. Now, Randy has a flashlight, so that will be her there in the red. Randy is red, and she is going to try and get the hell out of there straight away because she's got a job to do and is not too interested in taking down monsters and horrors just yet. Now, Randy's got a couple of special abilities floating around, that's cool. She's actually going to get a free investigate or search action every round. We'll be taking advantage of that pretty soon, but the thing we've got to have a look at most here is that 4 in the bottom left corner, and that is her escape ability. Now, this number represents how easy it is for us to escape spaces that have monsters in it. Just the same as our survivors have the movement-related numbers in the bottom left, so do our monsters. As you can see, here we have a 1 and a 1, which represents their total trap value. They have 2 trap. Randy has 4 points of escape, which means she can move out of that space unencumbered. Beautiful. Let's get her out of there. We're going to go 1, 2, and we do have a third movement or a third action that we can utilize here, and we are definitely going to do it. But we need to note, our character, our investigator, has moved into a flooded location. Any further actions we take while in a flooded space are going to cost us 1 point of oxygen. So for us to move, we have to expend 1 point of oxygen to get out of that location. We're going to do that. We're going to use her third action to move into this little area over here. So what's so special about this location? Well, it's got the little hand here, which represents something to do with the story. In this case, it is a place where we can investigate. And lucky for us, although Randy has used all 3 of her activations, she has the Curious Mind ability, which grants her 1 free investigate or search. We're going to investigate because, as I mentioned before, this is a race against time, and we have a certain number of things to accomplish in such a little time. We're going to spend another point of oxygen, and we're going to investigate. We're going to roll 1 dice here, hoping for a success. A 5. Actually, we do it. Awesome. And we can take a success token and pop it on top of that objective. In this particular case, we need to get 3 successes on that token before we can pick it up and take it to our final destination on the map. For us, in this scenario, there are 3 of these tokens scattered around, so we need to find those and get the hell out of here. Just going to use this as a success marker. Now, in a normal game, that would be Randy's activation done and dusted. But because we are playing a solo game or with 4 investigators, Randy does have, in this case, 2 additional actions to play with. So we're going to use both of those floating around in that room there, hoping for more successes. We investigate a second time, and another 5. And we'll spend her final activation, a third investigate, and we've failed. Now, I don't much like failing, so I'm going to go ahead and exhaust some sanity. I'm going to take one of these sanity tokens, pop it on her board, and I'm going to re-roll this dice. And I can do this as many times as I want. I'm going to do it again. Oh, and 1 more. Oh, come on. Again. Randy has a sanity limit of 5, so this is full on. Come on, 1, just 1, please. Nah. All of those rolls, the highest I could pull was a 4, and guess what? I've used every single point of sanity I could do. Randy is knackered, so she's going to have to wait until a little bit later before she can get her objective there. All right, next in line, we have the blind. So all of the blind on the board will activate. And yeah, we actually do have 2. Now it's a little far away, but we have 1 blind up the top here and 1 down the bottom. They're going to move, attack, and then do their special. Now, as far as movement goes, we have 1 in the middle over here who's going to move down into that bottom corner so they can attempt to move towards our investigators. We'll check his special, choose an investigator in this blind's line of sight to be weakened. All the investigators in line of sight are weakened instead if he is stationed in a consumed room. Thankfully for us though, this blind cannot see any of our investigators. We then move the bottom one down here, who's also situated in the middle of the room, and they're going to move into that top right space here, heading on out. The order tracker moves to Jared. So let's see what he's got. All right, well, Jared's not much of a fan of this monster in the room. So I think he's going to take another pot shot at it. He's got 3 dice to roll, hoping for 3 pluses again. Now, Jared's not much liking the look of this beastie here, actually either of them. And unfortunately for him, he's drawn 0 new activations. So he's just going to be dealing with his own 3. Let's see if he can take out the husk, huh? 1, 2, 3 hits there. Thank you for that 3 plus. That's going to be 3 wounds dished out. Now, the husk here only has 2 wounds left. And this little mind eater here, he's just got 1 wound on him. Unfortunately for us, we can only target 1 monster when we are shooting ranged. So that extra hit is wasted and our husk is defeated. Now, brilliant news for us, for Jared. For defeating a monster that actually has some horror value behind it, we get to take 1 of his sanity tokens and flip it over to its madness side. If the husk had more than 1 horror, we would be able to flip his other one as well. Now, the awesome stuff about this is if we manage to kill a monster that has horror value and we don't have any sanity tokens, we get to draw a consciousness card. This is a reward for tackling the horrors on the board without actually resorting to insanity. Jared, pretty pleased with himself right now. He's going to get the heck out of there. He's going to go 1, 2 into the flooded room, and that will end his activation. The turn tracker moves on to Hysteria, a monster who has not yet made its way onto the board. So we continue on to our blank investigator space, and we move to the next one, Delirium. We have a couple of Delirium on the board, so I'm just going to move them about. Boom, boom. Nothing too fancy there. These guys will do a move, a special, and an attack. The special for the Delirium, we would choose an investigator in a range of 1 and do bad stuff to them. Thankfully, no one is in range, so we're just going to let that be. And the turn tracker moves on to Arthur. Now, where is Arthur? Oh, I've already got him mixed up. All right, Arthur is over here in the blue. He's got a pretty neat search ability. So I'm thinking we're going to make the most of that. Now, searching is a very useful way for survivors, for investigators, to pick up new cards for their inventory. At any given point, an investigator can have 4 cards to their name. And if they want to search after that, they're going to have to discard. Now, Arthur's ability is solid. Search, something useful. You may reveal 3 search cards, choose 1 to keep, and discard the others. So for us right now, we've scored an assault rifle, an SMG, and a javelin launcher. Wow! All of these are ranged weapons. The assault rifle is extremely solid. You may re-roll all of the dice once, and this thing rolls 4 dice, hitting on 4+ at a range of 3. Oh, I love that one. The submachine gun is pretty okay. It's got a range of 2. 5 dice, but it needs 5+. You may exhaust 1 sanity to roll 2 additional dice, and you may use this effect multiple times. That's pretty sweet. This javelin launcher, 2 range, 4 dice, 3+, 1 damage per hit. You may exhaust X sanity to deal X additional damage. X is no more than 3. Whoa, that's pretty amazing. Look, it's a toss-up for me between the javelin launcher and the assault rifle. Let's go the assault rifle today. Big find there, Arthur. Now he could make use of it while we're hanging around to take out this other little mind eater, but he's no real concern to us at the moment. So let's get out of here. One more point here, and his third point out into the flooded room. Now, unfortunately, this round, Arthur got the 0 as well, so there will be no additional activations, and we move into the next monster activation, the Ravenous. Now, these guys aren't on the board yet, so we'll skip through them and move to Felicia's turn. Now, Felicia, she's our final investigator, and she's got a neat little ability granting her a free movement every round, and she can actually heal our survivors out there as well. Now, she starts with the scalpel, and we may as well make use of it. Show that sucker off. This is only 1 dice to be rolled, hitting on a 3+, but it deals 2 damage. Now, the cool thing about melee weapons is that they can deal damage across any number of models in the same space, really balancing them nicely with the flexibility of the ranged weapons. Let's see how she goes with the scalpel here. A 3 is enough, and we deal out 2 damage, killing the little beastie. Now, unfortunately for us, the Mind Eater doesn't have any fear value, so we're unable to draw a consciousness card. But that's okay, let's get her out of here. Actually, no, we'll search for her, we'll draw a card, and we score a Rivet Gun, a ranged weapon. 3 range, 5 dice, 4+, 1 damage per hit. After the monster takes at least 1 wound, it is slowed. Slowed is good, it just means they lose one of their movement activations. So that's 2 of her activations down. She has 2 to go thanks to that +1 token she's got. So she's going to go 1, 2, ending in that flooded zone. Finally, the turn tracker moves on to the final monster, the Twisted. We don't currently have any on the board, so that is the end of the round. And we move into the refresh phase. Now, there are a number of little bits and pieces that can go off in the refresh phase, but the most important of these is the reordering of the character turn markers. So we're just going to shuffle Randy up 1, Jared up 1, our blank space, Arthur, and Felicia, and we're going to take that first space marker and drop it down the very end. So it just changes the way things work for us. So into the new round, we would move the devoured marker, we would devour another room, we would spawn another 3 sets of monsters on the board. We'll deal out our next 4 extra action tokens and just hope that we can win this race. Now, I'm not going to play any more right now, but I will just quickly show you what's happened on the map. I know you just kind of saw a ton of monsters everywhere, but let me just go into depth how frightening this has become. Over here, we have 3 fairly high hit point monsters, all of which with at least 1 point of armor, guarding one of our clear objectives. We're slightly more okay down the bottom with just that 1 blind, but even he has 2 hit points and 2 armor protecting him from the first couple of points of damage. The scariest thing, though, is currently our path to the final objective is just laden with monsters. The only way we can get in is from here, or from here. We can move through here, we can move from up top, but our only entry point is through here, boom, 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 all the way down here. Now, we've got monsters there. That sucks, but we also have flooded spaces here, and I haven't shown you the complete brevity of the flooded space, so let me just exaggerate a couple of movements over with our investigators. Randy, up in the top there, who spent most of her activations trying to, well, get some successes on the objective token there. She is down to 3 points of oxygen. 1, 2, 3 more points and she's down to zilcho, and from then on she has no oxygen to play with. For -1, -2, -3, for every one of those actions she has to roll a dice, and for every success she doesn't make she will take a wound. Under 3, she's going to be rolling 2 dice. Again, for every success she misses, she loses a wound. And then if she drops to 6, 3 dice, and then death. The only way a character can get their oxygen back is to move into a space that doesn't have a flooded icon on there. And at the end of their activation, they will bring their oxygen marker all the way back up to 6, wherever that might be. Brilliant. So I'm not going to lie, it hurts to have an objective marker covered in the floodwater. It means you're going to be spending a lot of time there either taking damage or failing every roll you make. But what hurts more than that is the second marker down the bottom, which is also flooded. In this very first scenario, players are taught immediately the importance of oxygen, and man, it only gets worse from there. I don't want to spoil too much about this scenario, but man, you will know the importance of oxygen. That's all I can say. Alright, so that'll do for the brief gameplay look. Let's head back and just have a bit of a discussion about what this game is and what this game is not. Actually, before we get into that outro, let's take a look at the monsters real quick. Now, we've already seen the Husk and his little Mind-Eater friend there. The Husk's main ability is to summon these little guys, and they kind of clog up the table a little bit, which is really cool. Slows your investigators down and, hands over a couple of wounds there. But definitely, the Husk is something you want to get rid of pretty quickly. Next, we have the Ravenous, and these guys, well, they're more adept at sort of reducing the investigator's armor. For every Ravenous in the same space as a survivor, their roll to save will be reduced by 1. So in most cases, we'll be rolling 2 dice to save. In this case here, our survivor would only be rolling 1, and if we miss that success, well, that is going to be 1 point of damage to the investigator. The Blind is another one we saw a little bit of. They're kind of an interesting one. Wording-wise on here, when they move, the Blind moves towards the nearest investigator's line of sight. So we have to take into account where our investigators can see, and the Blind moves towards that. Now they're special. We choose an investigator in the Blind's line of sight, and they become weakened. And in fact, if they are in a consumed location, all investigators in the line of sight are weakened. This basically means that the investigator receives a weakened token and must use an action to discard it before they attack. Next, we have the Hysteria, and they're a pretty interesting little beast. They don't really have any innate attacking abilities. They don't get in there and attack anybody. But they're special. Well, that's going to cause some damage. Basically, what the Hysteria will try and do is move towards investigators, and then for their attack, instead of actually doing damage, they will possess the investigator, and the Hysteria will actually be removed from the game board and placed on the investigator card. Now, the Hysteria is then counted as being in the same place as the investigator for the rest of the game, and every time that their special goes off, which is the first thing we check, they're actually going to deal 2 damage, and if they're in a consumed location, they're going to slow the investigator. This is pretty much a guaranteed 2 damage. There are no saving throws there, which is pretty crazy. Survivors can, of course, still target the Hysteria as though it is in the possessed survivor's space, so you can still shoot at it and damage it. It just gets a bit scary when there's a ton of those guys floating around. And also worth noting that they've got a point of resistance as well. Next up, we have the Delirium, which is this 3, lots of tentacles on this guy. They're going to move, and then they're going to attempt to do their special. Choose an investigator with range of 1 space and roll the d12, this sucker here. And if we roll and get this symbol here, we draw the investigator into that monster's space, and then it's going to attack it straight on. And if you thought that was bad, if the Delirium is in a consumed location, an investigator must take 1 wound for each Delirium in the same space before performing a move, which means it's a lot harder to retreat from these guys. Now here's one we didn't have in our little intro playthrough there, Agony. Now these guys just move and attack, but their attack is pretty brutal if they're in a consumed location. They roll that d12 at the end of the attack, and if they get that little / symbol there, the investigator must either choose 1 to take a wound or to become paralyzed. He's pretty brutal, and in fact, he's got quite a high trap value on him, which means it's pretty hard for our investigators to escape him. Putrid are our next one here. These slug-looking guys, they're going to move and attack as well, but check out that hit point rating. They need 6 damage before they can be taken out, and they've got 1 point of resistance there as well. Before their attack, we're going to roll that dice, and if we get, where is it, the little teeth symbol here, the investigator must discard one of their search cards. Whoa. And if we're in a consumed location, after the putrid takes a wound, each investigator in the same space also has to take a wound. So they must explode with some sort of acid or something. Now, the final of the standard monsters we've got here is the Twisted. He is a pretty beastie thing as well. 5 points of damage to take him out, and with 2 points of resistance, that's going to be pretty hard. We've got another one of those roll the d12 things, and if we get the eye symbol, this one here, the investigator resolves a madness card, which is a whole bunch of negative effects in there. And even if we don't roll that symbol, the investigator takes 1 point of madness. Now, I don't think I mentioned how the madness cards work, but anytime an investigator accumulates 3 madness points, they discard them and draw a card. So it's just a little ticking time bomb to keep in mind. Over here we have its consumed effect. The Twisted will gain +1 range. Wow. Now, they're just the standard monsters. We should also note that we have epic monsters as well, and these are the big miniatures. Check them out. Now, each of these guys will make an appearance throughout the campaign, but you can go ahead and include them in any of the other missions as well. They just take the place of one of the 6 monsters that's going to be in there. It's certainly not a good idea to have more than one. It's not recommended, at least. Now, the first one we'll take a look at is the Bathophobia one here. This guy is gruesome. Now, he's not got the highest hit point ranking, but his resistance is through the roof, and he'll hit for 3 points of damage. He's going to attempt to do his special, move, then attack. His special will be each investigator within 3 spaces rolls that d12. They roll this one, they are dealt 1 damage. If it's the eye, this one here, they can become slowed or weakened. And the worst one, if we roll the Flaming Heart, I do believe it is this one on the dice, the investigator will take a Bathophobia token and then take 1 wound for each of those tokens they have. Oh. Alright, and it's finally its consumed effect. After he takes a wound, each investigator within 3 spaces will gain that Bathophobia token. He is just brutal. Next, we have the Madness Within Epic Monster, and he is pretty cool, got some sweet looking bat wings going on and a pretty gruesome face. Now, this guy is kinda crazy. He doesn't do any physical damage as a part of the attack, but he does with his special. He first moves, and his movement is increased, moving 1 additional space for each madness token the nearest investigator has, so you kinda wanna keep those to a down low. Then it tries its special. Choose an investigator in the same space to take 1 wound, then spawn a linked monster of the chosen investigator in the same space. That means for every special, we spawn the related monster card, the monster card that's sitting underneath the little survivor card in the turn tracker in their space. That could mean really, really bad things. The last one is Substance. Now this guy, he's like a snaky looking dude with arms. He's made up of all these gross bodies. Not a huge amount of hit points on this guy. Of course, he has that 3 resistance there, so we're in for a bit of trouble. He's going to do his special, move, then attack. Now, his special is pretty full on. Basically, he's going to take monsters from the board that are close to other investigators, and he's going to put them on his card. And then we move the Substance Epic Monster to that space, so he can potentially move straight to an investigator. Monsters on this card must be killed before Substance can take wounds. So his 4 hit points is really not just 4 hit points. It's going to be 4 hit points plus whatever other monsters he has collected. What's worse is he is going to activate with every monster that is on his card. So for example, we have a husk on his card. Every time the husk card comes up in the turn order track, and that just means he's going to attack often and hard. Ow! Alright, so they are all of the base game monsters. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of variety as you play. There's always going to be a new monster to take on, and we have a ton of expansion content to go through at some stage as well. But I think that'll do it for here. Yeah, let's move into that outro, and we are done for another one. Boy, did that little playthrough sort of drive some of my initial thoughts of the game home. This game is just a pain in your first playthrough. As you're picking up the nuances of this game, as you're learning the rules and learning the flow of the game, it's slow and it's fiddly and it's completely not what I expected it to be. You know, you have guys on a map games and they're fast and exciting and flourishing. You're getting out there, you're picking up your new weapons, you're laying down hordes of zombies or orc zombies or goblins or spiders or anything like that. But as soon as you hit the under the water deep sea mining facility, everything grinds to a halt, and this isn't the game that you think until you realize what this game is trying to achieve. Now, the first few pages of the instruction booklet, they are an introduction to a story that creeps on through the gameplay. As players progress through the scenarios, they're greeted with introduction text to the scenario and winning text to the scenario, pushing you through the story elements on the way through. As you play the game and you pick up your consciousness cards, these are little buffs, rewards for your characters for taking out scary enemies without having to resort to sanity. I think I mentioned that actually. The madness cards, they're kind of negative ones, and they often involve monsters spawning in your locations or other negative effects like being slowed or weakened. On these cards, there are paragraphs akin to some of the journal entries that you'll find in games like Dead Space or the audiographs, I believe, in Bioshock Infinite, all these sorts of things, all these snippets of stories that I'm sure if you took them and rearranged them into a timeline, they would make perfect sense. But as you're playing the game, you're getting these scattered bits of information helping draw out that fearful craziness that this game is all about. And then you find that this slow and plodding game is a lot more about the methodical planning. This is not an action Ameritrash game. This is a very puzzly Ameritrash game still. There's definitely a lot of dice rolling involved, especially for those successes. But I think the sanity mechanic, allowing you to re-roll those ones, helps mitigate that quite a bit. It does mean you're not going to be picking up those consciousness, those reward cards as often through the game, but it does give you a chance to deal with the randomness that it does throw at you. On my second playthrough of this introductory mission, I got this close to a victory. I'm not saying anything about the scenario because I believe it adds to the story to not know what you're getting yourself into. But the time that Devoured Track hit the very end, I was this close to my very final place, and it was just, it's gut-wrenching a little bit, but it does show you how well put together this game is. Yes, it's fiddly, but that fiddliness ensures a greater breadth of replayability. Yes, it's slow, but if you took it too quickly, you would miss the subtleties of this game, the story that draws you in. That is where this game wins. If you're after Zombicide, this game is not going to be for you. This is not a beer and pretzels night kind of game at all. This is a gather your friends for a kind of a very intense gameplay session where players are going to be switched on and know the limitations of their playing abilities. Like I said though, the first time you play this game, it is probably going to suck and you are probably going to have people not want to play it again. I wasn't sure I wanted to play it a second time after my first one because I just didn't get what I was sitting down for. But The second playthrough, you're familiar with what you need to know. You haven't had that dreary rule book read. No one's had to explain anything to you. You're just in, and you're in with the puzzle. And I appreciate that very much. Now, the very first time I played also, I played it solo. And I know it plays as a solo game, but there is just so much to micromanage in this game that it just does not lend well to solo. 6 players. Yes, everyone has their own responsibilities. You do your character and then you do your monster. You do your character, then you do your monster, and then you go boom, 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 boom. You're through the round, you go to the next round, and I feel it's going to be quick. But as a solo player, you are reaching across quite a broad table space, and you are moving, you know, that little marker to the next character, and then you read the card and you're like, this is what I've got to do for this one. All right, boom, 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 boom. 2 minimum, I'm saying. I probably won't jump through this one solo. I'm not saying go out there and grab it. I'm not saying I recommend it entirely either. But it is a very well-designed game. It is a very engrossing game story-wise. And even with its randomness, every dice roll it draws you in. Even if you get 4 fails, 3-4 failures in a row, it just means that you're going to drive your characters insane. I'm really, really hoping to play this one through. And believe me, I've only looked at the base game content so far. I went all in on this Kickstarter pledge. So I have the Encountered Horrors, the Oracle's Betrayal, the Rise of Dagon, the Endless Nightmares expansions. I have all these little boxes to open, and there's just... I'm driving myself mad with this one. But there is certainly something there. I don't know. I've probably repeated myself far too many times in this outro, but it is just one of those games where I have a complaint, but then I remember something cool about it, and then I remember that other complaint that I had. It's wild that I'm still thinking about it, I think. There's something there. There is something there that it's got its hooks in me, and as much as I don't want them to be there, I'm going to go back and I'm going to play it again and again and again for the story, for the tension. I'll tell you what though, I can't promise that I'm going to win every mission before I play the next one. Oh. Alright guys, that is it for this one today. If you've liked what you've seen, if you've liked me prattling on about this game, make sure you like, comment, subscribe to my videos because there's going to be plenty more of these to come. We're in October, we've got Halloween coming up. I'm going to try and stick to horror-themed games as much as I can for this period. I'm going to try and churn them out as quick as I can. Thank you very much for watching. As always, my name is Michael. This is Bits of Board, and we'll catch you next time.